I've got, like most places, you've got an academic environment, or you've got an old environment, and many organizations are like this. You've got a lot of complexity, a lot of business processes going on, information being collected all over the place. And after, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, you don't know where this stuff is anymore, right? And
Mm.
that is, the ICO isn't concerned about you losing a thousand PCs. They're concerned about you having lost data.
Mm.
And so in terms of like the final kind of financial liability, um, and just, the protection of people really, and our research data as well, because research is, we're not we're not one of those universities that's like getting 80% of the revenue for research. There are some, but it's still 20-25%. It's many millions per year. And we deal with, big industry partners who want you to protect that, and it can be very, very challenging in an academic environment, because it's typically, not terribly mature in terms of systems management and that kind of stuff. So, and I have very limited resource. If I at least know where the data is, see, currently we're a lot of people are prioritizing based on how bad the vulnerability is, or how bad this is or that is. But what if you prioritize instead of on the data? So if I, because this is our approach, is implement Lepide, and then most people use it to monitor file shares and stuff. I'm like, no, I'm going to push this out to every single desktop and laptop in the environment,
Right. Yeah.
because I know that someone in HR will have been keeping, I don't know, getting copies of passport photos and not deleting them off their thing, or applications, and student admissions and this and that, just gaps in process, and just things that have been overlooked for years. Are those the sheep?
Yeah. I'm going to mute myself.
This is
Yeah.
amazing. Right? Just keep it all like that. So I find it's kind of like asset management, but for your data, so you know where the stuff is, and then you can really prioritize. For me, if I have an HR system, or a student admission system, or a research system that's got loads of sensitive data on it, that's got personal records for 20, 30, 40,000 people on it, that one system, and this can be a desktop on someone's desk, that one system is more important to me than 300 public access PCs that I have in the library. Those aren't as important to me. So it allows me to prioritize. And you know what? I'm going to clean that up. I'm going to tighten those access controls. I've got a lot of people that have access to this that don't need to, or they may have left, all this stuff. But it allows me to very quickly, sure, I've only fixed that one system because I've only addressed that one system, but it had a substantial percentage of the amount of kind of data risk to it. If I lose 50 PCs in the library, of public access PCs, it's not going to make the news. If I lose one that had a bunch of passports on it or whatever, I keep saying passports because I speak about Marriott too often, but that's going to make the news. That's going to be a far bigger reputational loss. That's going to bring the ICO down on me. So that was kind of, I had the strategic view of really cleaning up the environment that we have.
Makes so much sense to me, because I feel that like sometimes people kind of get so bogged down about, I don't know, that they've forgotten what they're actually trying to protect. Like what is the whole point of Skip? Well, it's to stop people stealing stuff or compromising, or like, but ultimately it's about the data. Like that's the stuff that actually really matters. So figure out what that risk is. That's really important. Know where your risk is.
Yeah, I mean, the availability and the integrity of the systems is obviously also important.
Of course,
and
right,
it's
right,
kind
right.
of where I was, where I was coming from most of the time, and protect the system, protect the data on it. But in this case, at least, I kind of shifted away from my traditional approach in that I've got fundamental issues that are going to take me a while to solve, but I can mitigate a significant amount of our exposure quickly just by identifying where it is and addressing the 1% of systems that have 80% of our data on it. That really helps me prioritize it and reduce risk significantly on the limited resource that we have.
That's a really common use case for a lot of our clients, is they realize that actually, frankly, they've got a bit of a mess, and they need to figure out, well, what do we do while we try and fix all these other things? How can we start to figure out, well, what is the stuff we want to protect, and how do we get down to the real basics of this stuff as well? It's quite interesting. Yeah,
that's cool, because you guys had that punchline, like security starts with data, and
Yeah.
The data always mattered, but to be honest, I was always a bit more about the systems. And
Uh-huh.
after talking to you guys, I started focusing a little bit more on the data.
Yeah.
And the kind of click was, the data is actually something I could action fairly quickly.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's funny because when you're trying to secure systems and you're dealing with your IT department and all this stuff, it can be very slow. There can be a lot of resistance and this and that. But once you start talking about data, then all of a sudden you've got, oh, well, then your legal department's involved, your data protection's involved. All of a sudden they're willing to give you resource and time and
Yeah.
cycles to fix those things. They may
Do
not
you-
understand,
yeah.
oh, we need to get our patch level up to a certain thing, or we need to improve our asset management, but they understand that, oh, we got an awful lot of data there, and it doesn't need to be accessed by so and so. So yeah, let's fix that. And
Do you think quite often security guys think that data is their problem? Do they see that data as being a part of their core role, or they? Because sometimes we have conversations with security professionals, and they're kind of almost a bit dismissive that that's not really our bit. No, we're interested in firewalls and all that stuff. It's not about the data.
yeah, and I think it's part of that disconnect between security and the business most of the time, because the data is the business, right? Or it's very business relevant. That's why the business has all these information systems, all these computers to have and process the data. Um, Whereas, yeah, we're used to be more computer geeks, where we don't actually do stuff with the computers. We just play with the computers themselves all the time. But that's not why the business doesn't buy thousands of servers and tens of thousands of endpoints to play with them. They need them to do a business function, and they are information systems, so they have information on them. So yeah, I do think there is a disconnect there between security and even IT in general. They don't. I think it's definitely improving, but there is that kind of disconnect between the data. Yeah, we look more at systems, and I certainly look more at systems. I still do look at systems, but I'm prioritizing the data a little bit more, because it's easier to action quickly. It can significantly reduce your exposure, and the business, we may be disconnected from the value of the data, but the business isn't. And that means you'll get a lot of support from your DPO and your head of legal and and your executives, because they understand the value of that. So you'll tend to find it's easier to round up support to clean up the data than it is to get the systems. Interestingly, the flip side is also true from the data protection side. So I find that the people who are very concerned about the legal side of things, the GDPR compliance, the legal processes, how data is acquired, stored, processed, disposed of. They're very concerned about the data and the flows and everything, but they tend to be completely in the dark as to the information security side of things. They go through all these processes to make sure that you're GDPR compliant and you've got all these controls around your data, but then they have no idea that it's going to go sit on a database server that's 6 years end of life, missing
Yeah,
patches
I
going
guess
back
it's a
5 years.
different language, isn't it? It's
Yeah,
not a language they're familiar with, is it? Yeah. Mm.
it's surprising just how siloed it is. And I remember going to was it the EU Data Protection Summit back in November last year, and I don't know why these people invited me to this conference. It's the same organizers as PrivSec, and I'd been to PrivSec before in Dublin, and so they invited me back for this one. But PrivSec was privacy and security. This one was just GDPR. So I was like, I'm gonna talk about information security all the same. And this room full of lawyers, and they just had no idea of what was going on in the IT and information security space. And it was very, very interesting, because I think there were about 80 people in the audience, and I had LinkedIn invitations from more than half of them as I got off the stage already. And I had law firms approach me like, we had no idea that there were all these additional risks about how it's actually stored and this and that, asking to do portfolio assessments. So I think, yeah, and I think I've mentioned this to you before. Like, you guys should go talk to DPOs. And I've had several kind of DPOs approach me and say, I think our IT or our security people might be a bit like the people you're describing in your talks, where they've got their blinders onto the business. Could you come in and kind of do an assessment to see how our on paper data protection processes match up with the actual systems and infrastructure. So that's an interesting disconnect there as well. I think there could be there's a booming market for data protection and the GDPR compliance products. I think that could be quite great for you guys.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, GDPR is obviously as a big driver for a lot of organisations buying our stuff. Yeah, it's a massive one.